Right, well, we've collared Dave to do a quick podcast while he's eating his lunch and drinking his cup of tea in between a million jobs that he's normally doing. So thank you for coming on.
It's more like press ganged.
You had no choice.
Yeah, you had no choice. I'm your wife.
You are my beautiful wife.
Aww.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? If you could talk about anything, what would you talk about?
I don't know. I suppose family. I don't know. I suppose things I do, things that I've done.
Well, you could talk about where you've just been. That might be useful.
Funny enough, I've just had an interview with the rural crime team from the Avon and Somerset Police.
You can't talk about that, you two.
Because all my friends and family know that I trail hunt, and we do it all within the law, and it's something that I got involved in when I was about 37. I broke my back, couldn't go back to playing rugby because rugby is so dear to me. I love rugby, I love the sport. That's rugby union, and my wife, again, press ganged me to go hunting once. And I went hunting. That was obviously when hunting was legal. And I suddenly realised what hunting's about. And it's not, back in those days, it wasn't about blood sport. Yes, it was part of it. But the major thing for me is I remember going to my first meet and the hunt set off. At the meet, you have a stirrup cup, you have sandwiches, whoever's putting it on, all the local landowners and farmers and the local community get together. A lot of elderly community were there, and we'd gone off on a trail, and about an hour and a half later we came back and still the elderly people were chatting away, and it was their way of catching up what's going on with the gossip, who needs a hand. As if someone's died, they would all rally around and make sure that the husband or wife left had support, that the fire was lit and they had food in the cupboard, or they'd be invited. And to me that was about hunting community, and I still see that going on now. And I suppose that's why I'm so passionate about my trail hunting. It's about the country community.
I was going to say, it is about the community, isn't it? It is about, we live in the countryside, and the countryside isn't just, say, in Somerset, it's all over the country, and there's lots of these very small organisations that come together to try and support people in the farming community. There's a really high suicide rate in the farming community, really high, and it's particularly young men or older men, really.
I think it's totally understandable because farms, they've either got bigger or they've stood still. And I think the farms that have got bigger become more industrialised, so they will employ contractors in. And the person running the farm isn't a farmer anymore, he's a manager or the director of the business. And when you're, as you guys, both you guys know, having your own businesses, when you're a director, you're directing the ship. Yeah, it's a bit like the captain of the ship, and you've got all the members of staff underneath you actually running the show. But when you're a much smaller farmer, you can't even employ your sons. Yeah, so therefore the sons go off, they go to university, they get other jobs, and then, the farmer farming it, who's 70, 80, the spouse dies, who's going to feed him at night time, and it's a tremendous amount of pressure. But if you can keep that close-knit community, there's the support system. And so I can fully understand why the suicide rates are just accelerating within that field, that profession.
But I think also the younger generation are struggling slightly, aren't they? Because there's not enough money in farming for people to be able to take that on and still support dad and mum and any other siblings if they're still at home, so that they then can't stay in their own community, and so therefore they get kind of pushed out, really. And I think that that's where that mental health crisis has kind of really hit a lot of the countryside people, because it's breaking up families that don't really want to be broken up. They want to be together. They want to. I mean, I know
there's not enough financial incentive to do it, or be able to afford to do it.
That's right. We talked about the buying food, and a lot of food is bought very cheaply from places like Aldi and places like that, and Tesco's, whichever supermarket you choose to go to. But all of those, that it is very cheap food. And in actual fact, you can't make it that cheap.
No, that's right. Yeah. And that's the challenge, really, isn't it?
You eat, Dave, don't worry. Nobody cares.
Okay, I'm eating. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because we talk about things like race, prejudice, and we talk about sexual agenda. That's very hot at this moment in time. And there's over 100 different forms of sexualities.
Or genders.
Or genders, yeah. But the farmer, the small farmer, is very marginalised out there. And, it's a dying profession. Yeah. And I think, since we, have come out of Brexit, it's probably beginning to highlight it. And with what's going over in Eastern Europe, it's even highlighted it more. We need to build a bigger community. I've never wanted to come out of Europe. I wanted to stay in. And the major thing I wanted to stay in was because of war. You keep your neighbours close to you and you keep that strong relationship with her. And that kind of ripples all the way down to the poor little old farmer. So getting back to the original question of where I've been, we had a lovely, healthy relationship building with the police force, because we get marginalised on a Saturday. We get rocks thrown at us. I get my tyres slashed. Children are fearful of these masked men coming at them, shouting abuse and swearing at them or whatever, just really provoking to cause a fight so they can get it on camera so they can prosecute somebody. And it's almost like a bit like what the football clubs have had to do is to make all-seater stadiums to take away the hooliganism part of the football, which was organised crime, CCTV, and come down heavily on people who are causing that trouble. They're not there for the football, never have been. And now that's seeping into other parts of our society, and I feel that it is part of our society as well. With people who are being prejudiced against people that go out trail hunting. I know in the news you see a very rare bit of clip where someone for some reason is breaking the law, and the law should come down heavily on them. I'm totally supportive of that, but don't tar me and everybody else with the same brush.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not right or not fair.
But that's a bit like saying every market stall holder is dodgy. Because,
yeah, it is.
Or anybody, like a bit like what was it? Only Fools and Horses. Do you know what I'm saying? It's always like everybody, and anybody that's a Cockney is this, or anybody that's from Somerset is this. And I know that you've experienced it yourself in other ways, Dave, in regards to you're very, very dyslexic, and that has created quite a big problem for you, because I know when you use the wrong word, I just laugh at you now, but
she does a bit.
Other people don't realise it's quite a serious disability, and people don't appreciate that, and it's like mental illness is a serious disability for some people, and you get judged and kind of, it's all the same, isn't it? And it's just so sad.
Just in different forms.
Yes, you're right.
And it's funny about my dyslexia, because I'm severely dyslexic with letters. I really, really struggle. Numbers, I'm okay. I'd say I'm above average on numbers. I'm not a boffin with them, but, I can really manage numbers quickly in my head. But letters, I struggle like mad. And for anybody else out there, just be open about it and laugh at yourself. I can now laugh at myself, where before I used to feel really ashamed and belittled by it.
But isn't that school? That was, in our day when we were at school, it wasn't something that you necessarily talked about, because people were a little bit ignorant about it.
Totally.
A little bit like mental illness.
Naive.
And I know we have dinner together quite regularly, all of us. And if Mandy comes along, well, Mandy's even worse than you. And between the two of you, it's just hysterical. We have a laugh, but not at your... I suppose it is.
Is at our expense, but it comes from this right place.
It's
endearing.
It's not.
That's different.
That's very true.
You're not jibing at me.
No.
It's endearing, and I feel that. But I think I feel that because I can be open and honest about it as well.
But that's the other side about being able to read and write, isn't it? Because whilst I know you're really good with maths, and I'm pretty average with maths, you're really good with maths. And I think when you feel inadequate around something, it closes your world down a little bit. And then that comes back to that mental health thing, because I know you've also had your own challenges with mental health. And it's like that bit about you don't want to let people know because you feel so judged by that.
Yeah. Yeah, you carry that shame. Let me speak for myself, because I can only speak for myself. Yeah, I carry shame about that. I felt stigmatized by it. On the way I got over it, obviously, beautiful support from you, Ange, and the family, was being open and honest about it. Sometimes it makes me squirm a little bit, but that's very rare. That's very rare. What I'm able to do in my role, my profession now as a therapist, is able to give of myself. And that, I'd like to think that people don't feel isolated by that, and that they're not alone. And if I can relate and I can pass on my experience, might not be their experience, but it might be something similar. But they will be feeling exactly the same feelings probably that I have or have done, is that shame, that kind of belittlement, that low self-worth about that and around that subject. That was back in when I was about 42, so that's nearly coming 18 years ago.
But you were being bullied at work quite badly.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. It was a situation where I worked for a very large American company, and they took over a European company, and the European company had a lot more presence than the American company, and just the total ethics. It became more of a dog-eat-dog, hyena type of mentality, and I think a few of us struggled with it. That came from the American company, and I think that the company was worse off because a lot of people left in the end. Which I did after taking certain amount of leave of absence and trying to get my mental health back together, which I did, again, say with lovely support of my family around me. And I've gone on to bigger and better things. But yeah, it was a dark period. Didn't enjoy it.
And I think you've made a really valid point there, touching on what you talked about a minute ago, about that having your family around you, and you were fortunate that you did have your family around you. And coming back to that bit about people being marginalised by being forced out of what they want to do, like being part of a family farm or part of doing a hobby that's helped them to kind of not feel quite so lonely and isolated. But you had the benefit of that. Some people don't have the benefit of that today.
It gets back to that farmer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where all his children have moved away, even moved abroad, and the wife dies, and then he's left to farm the animal and fend for himself.
He or she,
yeah. There's plenty of female farmers. No, you're right.
And that ends up with no sounding board. And I guess that's the problem, is the support network and the ability to talk about whatever is just reducing all the time.
Very lonely. Very lonely.
The world has become a very small place, hasn't it, to kind of travel. You can be in Australia in 24 hours and stuff like that. And whereas when you had to get a boat, how long did it take on a boat? I had
no idea. Weeks, I imagine.
Ditto, I don't know.
No idea.
But either way, so people's opportunities to move away are so much greater, aren't they? And I think as a result of that, you end up with that. People just get isolated. They will go to New Zealand. Like we know lots of people that have gone to New Zealand. You don't have to cover your face, by the way.
I'm eating my lunch still, so.
But we know lots of people that have gone over to New Zealand and places like that, haven't we? Where they've gone and worked and stuff like that, and and it's been really. They completely left their family behind. And they've got no support. The family that are here have got no support, and they've got no support out there either.
And it makes it a very lonely world sometimes, I think.
Yeah, you do need support systems. We're a pack animal. We are we've evolved to be in a pack, no different to a flock of sheep. That's how we keep safety. It's a bit like I'm not going to pronounce it, I'm going to try and persuade it. Is it murmurations at the starlings? When they all flocking together.
Well done,
I know, I'm good with that one. That could have gone completely wrong. It's about safety in numbers.
Yeah.
That one might get caught by a hawk or whatever, or a kestrel, but the other 99.9% survive. Yeah. And for survival, we need to be around our peers.
Yeah.
Around our peers, around our race.
And that links for me, that really resonates for me in the sense of like I'm in recovery from addiction and have been for many years. And that bit about knowing that, and it's obviously only my opinion, but seeing it being witnessed by lots of other people, that gaining a level of recovery from addiction, you need to have other people there to help you and support you.
Again, it's that support network, I presume.
Completely. And like-minded people that understand why you're where you are. And similar to what you were saying about mental health, it's exactly the same. You might not sit there and tell your clients your story, but you have an empathy there that may not be there for somebody who's not. I'm not saying that they can't do their job just as well, because they can, but it's that bit about actually...
It's a lived experience.
And I think that lived experience is...
It's funny enough, because I've had that thrown at me from our clients. I'm a therapist within a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre, and we do one-to-one counselling and also group therapy. And I've heard it whisper around in the group therapy room where, I'm open and honest that I've never been in addiction. I've never ever have been in addiction.
I'd question that,
but I'm working on it. But I must try harder. As per my school report, easily distracted. And people say to me, how can you help me? How can you help me? You've never been in addiction yourself. And my reply is, I'm nearly 60 this year. I've had 60 years of healthy living. That's what I can show you. Yeah. I can't show you healthy addiction because I've never been in it, and I'm glad that I will hopefully never be in it. Yeah. And that's where I can help people.
That's a really good kind of explanation, because I think that's right. You have other skills and other experiences that you can share with people, because I think very often, you're right, people with mental health problems don't feel that somebody who's opposite them, who hasn't experienced that, can't help. That goes for a lot of things. I don't think it's just...
Well, the other way of looking at it is if we all learned from the same person, we'd all have the same views, we'd all have the same life. Sure. You have to share experiences and learn things from different people in order to create your own kind of individuality.
Yeah, definitely.
It's funny, I just spent half hour in the car with a colleague coming back.
Colleague or friend?
Colleague, friend. Yeah.
You call them all colleagues?
Yeah,
I always find that really
hunting
weird.
friend, associate friend. No, he's a good friend. And he was just mentioning about he'd done jury service. And he didn't even know what a drug runner was. Bless him. But of his own admission, because he's never experienced it. There's a naivety about it, and that's okay. It's like when you see that beggar in the corner of the high street, you see people crossing over, and there's a fear base there. And that person has got a mental health issue, guaranteed, unless they're all part of an organised crime, where you get the female beggars carrying the child. That's organised crime,
Not necessarily.
Generally, I'm generalising here, and you're right, Angie. I can't paint everybody with the same brush. Oh, right. Ange said, say it again. You're right, darling. But they're vulnerable adults. They've got mental health issues. It's a bit like our prisons are full of people with lots of mental health conditions. No wonder they've turned to crime or found themselves ending up in a criminality kind of lifestyle. I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody knows the answer. But I feel if you could start teaching from reception or even nursery about being kind and respectful and values and healthy principles right from the word go. All right, I know some families, the children will go back and that'll all get undone. But if you could instill that into our babies almost of a healthy moral and a healthy principle, healthy values, I think our society or the world will be a much better place. It's never going to stamp out addiction or anything else, but I think it will help.
Yeah,
it's like we do have a bit of a family thing that goes, and it's come from Paddington. If you're kind and polite, the world will be right. And whilst that is, I think there's a bit of a fantasy there, because you can't control how somebody else conducts themselves towards you. But you can.
That's very true. And the other example that I've heard many times is, you're not born a racist.
Yeah.
You've heard something, you've learned something from someone.
Yeah. You're conditioned.
You're conditioned. And I guess it's the same kind of thing. you know, you're not born like it.
But it's like that bit when a child comes out, they're pure.
Yeah.
And what happens? What actually determines how they are going to be as an adult?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we then kind of, do we promote goodness or do we promote a negative?
Yeah, and I think also
living?
it depends on who you live with, where you live as well. I think different areas of the country, the world, even a town that you live in, you know, will have a slightly different impact on you and who you become.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually, and they were saying about they'd like to do an exchange on their flat and move somewhere in the country. And they've got a flat in London somewhere. And I thought, God, I'm sure some people would like to go live in London that live in the country. It's a great opportunity for some people. And it's a local authority property, so you can do it. And it's nobody wants to live where he lives.
Right.
And you think, that's really sad.
That is, isn't it? Yeah, when you think about it.
Yeah, it is really sad. Is that a nice lunch, Dave?
It's a lovely lunch. You carry on talking, guys. I'm eating. I've got cheese and piccalilli here. Gorgeous.
Oh, dear me. So I suppose, where do you go in your world, Dave? I mean, you do a lot of things. You're not just a practitioner in counselling. You also run and maintain lots and lots of properties. I know what you do, obviously. But, I mean, I suppose, where do you take your values and your beliefs into that kind of work? Does that make sense?
I think it just comes back to, like you've already mentioned, Aunt Lucy, you know, the Paddington's adopted mum in the film, you know. If you're kind and polite, the world would be all right. And I try my hardest. As like Ange would say, I'm only grumpy to Ange. I'm not grumpy to anybody else.
I can confirm that.
Yeah.
Everybody.
So poor old Ange, get it. And when we're with our friends and they say to Ange, "Oh, you're so lucky to have Dave. He's so nice and kind." It really winds Ange up. Stop doing it, friends, please.
But I think that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Is what you present to the world, and who you are when you're at home. And you're not a bad person. You're a really good person. But yeah, you're right. You're grumpy. You show your anger through to me. Not in a horrible way, but you can be grumpy, whereas most people don't see that. And I think sometimes that's that bit where, is it okay to be yourself in whatever given situation? So I know you two know me pretty well, so you know that I am consistently the same person. I don't put anything on for anybody. I am who I am. And
say it how it is.
I say it how it is.
Oh, you do. You're a rare breed, really, Ange.
Yeah.
You're totally. I know this podcast is all about me. But, you are very, very consistent. Very, very consistent. And I've heard people say sometimes can't really fathom what Angie Clarke's about because of your straightness.
You agreeing with him?
I am agreeing with him.
And
yeah. It's taken me a while to understand.
But then
you.
People have come back, read your book, and say, "Crikey, Ange, I know why you are the way you are," and they're in admiration of it because you are straight. Ange will treat me exactly the way she would treat mine, and vice versa.
Well, within reason, obviously.
Yeah. I'm not, but I'm on about I know you.
Yeah.
But you will treat everybody exactly the same, exactly the same.
So why doesn't the world do that? I mean, it's a generic question, but why can't we all just treat everybody the same as you treat your best friend or your...
I think it comes back down to environments, Ange, and I think it comes back to historical environments. And if you go back to the Victorian days when you were either a soldier or you're a farmer's peasant, you worked the land or you went on crusades. You went on crusades, and you raped and pillaged, and sold...
it wasn't the Victorians, by the way.
Well, no, all the way back round. But I think it was the Victorian days as well. But so you're either a soldier, you're my little soldier, the little boy now. My little soldier doesn't cry. So you're asking from a very early age to suppress your feelings. And I think we are. Our environment suppresses our feelings,
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I think also people, they like to portray a certain image of themselves out there, and that's why they hide their inhibitions, their fears, whatever it may well be.
But we had a conversation, didn't we, when we were talking about you being grumpy?
Yeah.
And I said to you, and we were talking, and I sent you a text saying, you know, you're not happy about this situation, and you went, no, I'm really happy. But I knew that there was something not right. And I think because I'm very intuitive, because I take the time to find out about people, and I'm interested in you as a person, it's the same as I am with you in that sense. I'm interested in most people, but I'm intuitively in tune, and it's like, I need you to just bloody well... sorry. I need you to just tell me what's going
like
on for you.
Sense,
because actually I pick up on it anyway. And if you were just honest and straight with me and said, this is how I'm feeling because of this and da-da-da-da-da.
It'd be better, right?
It would have been better. But I think, whereas I would tell you, if I felt a bit grumpy or I was a bit tired or I was a bit under the weather or whatever, I'd say to you, I feel a bit under the weather, blah, blah, blah. And it's resolved.
Yeah.
But can you see what I'm saying? And I think, why is it? Is it because people don't really want to hear? Do we feel that society doesn't really want to hear, oh, God, I had a really bad night's sleep last night type thing?
Well, it's slightly different because I think you're looking at more the negatives than the positives. But I went to an event once, and they said you need to stop telling people that you're good and you're fine, because everybody comes in and goes, oh, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Or yeah, I'm good. Are you good? Blah, blah, blah. And it's almost become a habit. It's a routine. Whereas if you actually say, yeah, I'm really good today, it's out of the ordinary, and people kind of listen to it and take note.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is the same, is people aren't vocal about their emotions, perhaps. Maybe that's the way to phrase it.
Yeah, I kind of thinking about it, I've always thought that as our modern world's developed, our sixth sense has been slowly diluted. I like you've got an unbelievable we call her the witch of the family, because I tell you this.
I've never heard you call Angie the witch.
The wicked witch. No, not the wicked witch. She has witchy powers. But we were driving back from Cheddar, and Will was at home, and I was driving, and suddenly just out of a bolt of lightning, anyway, Ron's died, and we had a very close elderly friend in Cheddar that we used to look after and be around and mow his lawn and take him out for meals and just, be a friend to him. That Ron's died. And I thought, where on earth? That nearly made me park the car in the rain, drive along our road. And of course, we get home, park on the drive, and Will is standing at the front door. And he said, Mum, Dad, Ron's died.
Wow.
And it wasn't the Ron that we thought, but it was our neighbour across the river called Ron, and he'd actually passed away. Such a lovely fella was Ron. Yeah, and that's happened many, many times. And I think that because we do live in a far more clinical world. Mike, you can see it. We've just come back from touring with William in India.
Yeah.
And, it's a bit, if you go to Vietnam, cross the road, you cross the road when the traffic is in full flow by putting your hand up and taking a leap of faith and just walking across. No one runs you over. That's what everybody does. You did that here, you're going to get run over. So we've got pedestrian crossings telling us when to cross the road and when not to. And we're like that, which is brilliant because it's great for health and safety, but we don't have to think for ourselves. When I see people, I'm at the pedestrian crossing, it's beep, 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 people are on their phones. They don't even look right or left.
No, that's very true.
It's my turn to cross, and they just walk straight across. They might even trip up the curb at the other side, which gives me a little laugh, but they do not look. And I think
they should all come and live here when you make it, because you haven't put a mirror up on the side corner, and you have to take your life in your hands every time you cross the blooming road.
So I reckon, back in the Stone Age when we all lived in caves and dragged our knuckles along the ground.
And Ange actually had a broomstick.
Yeah. I think when there was possibly a tsunami came, I think they might have been more attuned of what nature was doing, like frogs jumping uphill and the birds flying away.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost that. That's my theory on it anyway.
I think I kind of agree with you. I am quite sensitive to emotions. I'm sensitive to what's around me, atmospheres. But I think part of that was developed as a child because of what was happening to me as a little girl.
Coping mechanism.
It was a coping strategy. So I knew, I could tell the temperature of the room as to what was going to happen.
I guess you probably learned to read people much earlier.
Oh, yeah, completely. I knew what somebody was going to do. I was pretty aware emotionally and spiritually what was going to happen. And I think, so that started then. And I think I've just kind of, I read a lot. I listen to a lot of books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to people a lot. And I think when you do that and you take time, it does allow you to then feel the atmosphere of what's going on in a room. I think a lot of people don't listen. Like crossing the road, and it's silly, but where we live in a blind bend. I don't look for the traffic necessarily to cross the road on a 60-mile-an-hour road. I listen for the traffic, and it's kind of a little bit like that. I'm more aware of what I'm hearing than I am about what I'm seeing. Because I just think we sometimes have that false image, don't you? You see that person that's all beautifully made up, and he might have a nice suit on and a nice outfit and blah, 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 whatever. But actually, deep down inside, they're falling apart at the seams. And they're lonely, isolated. They don't really have any money. You know, it's all a show for the community or for whoever, the person next door. And we know people that have been in that situation. You think, wow, what, you've not got any money? No, I'm driving a great big car and I actually don't own it, and I don't own my house, and I don't own this. And, you know, that image is, there's images that people have had to create to cover up who they really are. Of
course, yeah.
And that's it. They build their lives on no foundation. And the only way you get foundation 99% of the time is hard graft, good direction, take advice from the winners, and crack on and do it. And I think our society in the Western world, and even in India, I can see everybody's on mobile phones constantly, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, or anything like that. And it becomes a virtual world, and it's not true life. Get off it.
A bit like what I was saying about, you know, people presenting this image of themselves, and that's what's got worse, isn't it, as a result of social media and so on. Yeah,
and that's the difficult thing, because telly, obviously the TV producers are only going to produce what's in demand. And Big Brother started this off 20 odd years ago, and look what's on telly now. It makes me feel sad about it, really, because that's what everybody's kind of destined for. Instant stardom. It doesn't happen, kids. Get out and work hard. Yeah, you can have whatever you want out there.
It does happen, and I think I want to argue with the point that it does happen for some people, but it's the minority that it happens to. The majority of those people, I think I caught tail end of something about they'd been on this program to make themselves famous, and ended up quite a considerable amount of those people had nervous breakdowns, had gone into bankruptcy, had invested all this money into these PR people, and then actually people weren't really interested in them anymore. A year down the road, they were working in the local supermarket, or indeed unable to work because they were so damaged by what happened to them. And I think that's the truth. That is the real truth. The world, like you said, I agree with you. You do have to work hard to get something back. We, all three of us, work very, very hard. We know that. A lot of people don't know how hard we work, but we do. And we've had the benefits of working hard. Some people work very, very hard and don't get the benefits, partly because they haven't had that grounding like you were talking about, and they haven't got anybody to help them to develop that into something. They've not been educated, if you see what I'm saying. And I know you've got to go out and educate yourself a lot of the time. I didn't even go to school, so I had to educate myself. But it's like some people don't have the confidence to do that, and I think there's a whole. I mean, would you be where you are today if you and I hadn't got married?
100% no.
No. And I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's about recognising that it's taken us as a couple to do what we've done, if you see what I'm saying. And
teamwork.
And it's a team. You can't necessarily do this on your own. And I could ask you the same question if you weren't married. Oh, no, you're not married to me, are you? But, where you and our relationship is very different to a lot of other people's. But, you look at how things have improved for you since you and I have been working together. It's massive. It's not a coincidence. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to it's about, growing up or whatever, doing whatever, and it's the people around you, the support that you get, and, just it's your environment is what helps create you.
And I suppose that's families, and obviously that's that generic word, family, but it doesn't necessarily have to be family. It can be your family of friends, can't it? Yeah. Because, you know, you don't choose your families, and sometimes they're not, you know, what maybe they can be, for whatever reason, and that can go back generations and generations, but it's about finding that support for you. Yeah. And that's my responsibility. Yeah, it's not the government's response, it's my responsibility. Yeah. It's a bit like, you know, I'm a massive believer that when I'm old and frail, that hopefully I've worked hard enough and saved enough money to pay for my care. I do not expect the state to pay for my care.
I expect my kids to pay.
Yeah, severely.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that, and I think that's about being independent, having those kind of values, gives me great self-worth. Yeah, really does give me great self-worth. I know other people would disagree with it, and hey, that's fine. That's up to them. And I respect their views and hear it. And that's okay as well.
But that's also about resilience, isn't it? And being realistic as well, because fundamentally there's only so much money in the pot, and there's only so many people that can be helped. And we've noticed that with the mental health services, which is why we set up the charity in the first place. Yeah. I'm just really aware, Dave, that
the time
you've got to go back to work.
Yeah, now you've had your lunch.
Yeah, you've had
your lovely lunch. What's for dessert then, guys?
Nothing.
Hey guys, lovely chatting. I've really enjoyed it. Spur of the hoof.
That's it.
You take care.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you very
Mike.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye.